Welcome, I'm John Glanville in this video 50 part 5 in my Calmness of Mind series, where today we explore some not so common sense solutions for your calmer life. And this is the final part of my mini ERP series, and I'll be discussing what options are available if you've tried all the mainstream scientific techniques but you still feel exhausted, anxious or depressed. Because if you've looped around all my videos 2 or 3 times, and if you've tried all the pharmaceutical choices that are available, and if you've explored all the psychological options, if you are eating well, if you're exercising, if you're taking sleep seriously, if you're on top of your housing, your family, your work, and all your relationship issues, if you've found the space to recharge your 6-month emotional energy battery, and if you've learned the art of managing this buffer of energy wisely and in line with your desires and your chosen intentions, and if you're finally loving yourself, and if you're happy being you, and if you still have anxiety, well then, what else can you do? So that's where we're going today with this video, which I've called "How might we apply exposure and response prevention to concepts we currently doubt might be true, just in case they are true, and actually contain the solutions that we unknowingly are looking for?" Now, up until now, we've been focusing on your brain and your body. So perhaps to do this, we now need to expand our perspective to include our soul and the universal field of energy that our soul is connected to. So even if for some this might make their logical left brain intellect feel a little bit uncomfortable, I still think we should move forward. So let's discuss how we might embrace our right brain capabilities to explore perspectives that are more common in Eastern or spiritual cultures, which suggest that we are souls having a human experience and that we are closely linked to energy and wisdom of the universe, which is not commonly taught in our Western world. So I would like to explore techniques that might allow us to increase those natural flows of energy between ourselves, other people, between nature, and of course into the universe itself. And to find ways that we might metaphorically discharge our atomic energy battery, as I discussed back in video 9, from all of the emotional landmines, repressed traumas and trapped energies, thus allowing us to become less dense and vibrate at a higher frequency. And to do this, might we become more open to considering concepts such as karma, blocked chakras, energy meridians, ancestral influences, parasitic energy forms, past life experiences, and egregores, which are energetic attractor fields which can transmit information and influence people seemingly outside of their conscious awareness. It's like when people say, "I've no idea why I did that. It didn't seem silly at that time. I just don't know what came over me." Could it be that we are being affected by energetic forces outside of our conscious awareness? Much like an iron filling wouldn't realize it was being influenced by a magnet. A tidal river doesn't realize it's been influenced by the moon. Sand on a little metal plate might not realize that it's been affected by frequency. But if you remember that we're not made of flesh and bones, our flesh and bones are made of energy, and energy can carry information. And of course, if we dig deeper, it gets really cool because we encounter the quantum stuff, like quarks and wavicles and things like that, things that can just jump in and out of different dimensions, and they can be in 2 places at the same time. They can even become entangled and instantly mirror each other's movements over any distance across the universe faster than the speed of light. and they can collapse from being a wave in the sea of probability into a particle of actuality influenced by the intention of an observer. Now, we've talked about this in other videos. So it's evident to me that we are both a 3D Newtonian creature of this planet, as well as being an energetic quantum soul intrinsically connected to and in communication with the rest of the universe, whether we realize it or not. Therefore, I'm not only John from England, but I'm also an energetic, formless, immortal point of conscious awareness, swimming in a sea of intelligent energy, along with 8 billion other blobs of energy on a ball of intelligent energy flying through space filled with gazillions of other balls of energy, all connected by a sea of energy called space, which is all full of energy. And wherever energy meets energy, which is everywhere, information can be transferred. And I think this is how metaphysical realms might work. And it's my guess that over and above what we know our brain can do in this material plane, I think our brain also acts like a quantum transmitter, broadcasting out our intentions or our prayers into the universe and into other people. And I think it also acts as a quantum receiver, where it's capturing and decoding all the information that's broadcast from nature and from those around us, and perhaps from other universal sources. And I think each person's brain has a unique access level to all of the universal information according to their current level of consciousness and the function that they provide to nature in this lifetime, whether they're aware of that purpose yet or not. Now, from this new perspective, might you see that it's not that hard to imagine the concept of an intelligent universe and how it might simplistically function. So this video is really what this whole course has been leading up to. Me sharing with you my incredible journey and all the crazy things that have happened to me. None of which I can explain, but which have been so life-changing and so incredible that I've wanted to capture every detail, so those who choose to follow this path can build upon what I've learned and pass that on to others too, as they figure more of it out. Everything that I'm about to share with you, I believe in. And as much as I can't give you hard evidence that it's true, you will be very hard pressed to give me hard evidence that it's not true. However, it is the truth of the eye-opening inner reality experiences that I've had. So this is the video where I say, what if there is a whole other dimension out there interacting with us, okay, that our left brain intellect may resist considering, even though from the beginning of all recorded history, people all around the world have been writing about such things and discussing these concepts. Now, years ago, my therapist and mentors encouraged me to explore these paths of study, but I resisted due to my logical left brain tendencies needing proof. And I would estimate that this delay of getting stuck in the logic and reason and looking for proof, I think it would have delayed my personal growth by at least 5 years. Therefore, I think it would be remiss of me to not share my experiences with you. I'd like you to try and keep an open mind. Don't let your beliefs limit your ability to explore new concepts. And remember that what you learned in school may not be the whole story, or it may not be the whole truth. So I would urge you to be willing to challenge your memory and to challenge the assumptions that your brain makes. In fact, my favorite quote from Dr. Hawkins is, "Memory is the recall of illusion as it compounds over the years." And I think that is just incredible. These days, I prioritize happiness over being right. And rules no longer give me security. To me, they just limit the opportunities that are available to me. Plus, when something strange did work, I had to learn to drop my left brain need to understand why, and just to simply enjoy the benefits from that success, regardless of how unconventional it may have seemed. And finally, when I decided to trust in some universal force beyond my understanding, I found it immensely liberating. I learned that my responsibility was to keep taking action each day towards my intentions, and to trust that the outcomes from those actions were the universe's responsibility and not mine. Then as my faith grew stronger, I realized that there were many responsibilities that I'd taken on which weren't even mine to begin with. So I was able to witness that, and I was able to let them go, because I understood that by potentially interfering in someone else's life, I might be creating more karmic problems for myself and them, and I had to learn to trust that there was a power that would guide and support them as well. Now, another surprising thing that I learned was that even after I had discovered new things, my unconscious mind still held on to old beliefs and old stories that it had initially been programmed with. Let me give you an example. Though I've been on a ketogenic diet for over a year now, and I try to avoid sugars, therefore I hardly eat any fruit, my unconscious brain still tells me that I ought to be eating my 5 a day. Such is the depth of its conditioning from the science and from the marketing that it was repeatedly exposed to as I was growing up. So what I've done is I've sensibly trained my brain to consciously ignore those old echo thoughts, as I can now do with prior intrusive thoughts or negative self-conscious stories from my distance path. Therefore, as I explored more and more unconventional and alternative methods, I had to learn how to temporarily suspend my old belief systems long enough for me to test out these new theories, no matter how hard my unconscious mind tried to sabotage me from taking action. However, what I found, and the significant experiential positive changes to my wellness as a result of being able to release old traumas, clear negative energy blocks, and to drop old conditioned responses like guilt and fear and doubt and shame, it made all this work incredibly worthwhile. And I'd also like to say that the knowledge I'm about to share is based on my personal experiences. However, I do not claim to specialize in this type of work. All I'm looking to do in this video is to share my experiences and to share my thoughts, so you can decide for yourself if you would like to check out these concepts, or if you would like to work with other professionals who specialize in these more esoteric practices. However, it is one of my intentions for the coming year to see if I can secure enough funding for me to spend 2 or 3 years working with the best teachers around the world to acquire a more comprehensive knowledge of trauma release and energy work. And I would then like to create a video series similar to this, discussing what I found. So if anyone has the financial resources to help subsidize my dream to make that happen, then that would be really wonderful. So let's get started, and let me give you an example of something that happened to me that I cannot explain, yet it resulted in me instantly feeling at least 20% happier within myself. A friend called me one day and she said that she just spent a few days with a woman who could read your aura, and from the information stored in your aura, she could tell you about past lives which may be affecting you in this life. Now, of course, my initial thought was, really? Come on, you know. However, my friend, she's very intelligent and she'd had a positive experience. So I took my own medicine and I said to myself, don't believe your brain, John. Check it out for yourself. Get some real world data and then you'll know, rather than listening to your brain, which is guessing. So a few months later, I went along and I sat in this woman's kitchen and she looked at me and she said, you have a bubble of pain around your body and you are reluctant to let people get close to you. And she went on to say, in a previous life, I'd been living in a log cabin in a remote part of Canada. And my parents were very poor. And she said that I was about 2 years old. And my parents were arguing in the house. And my father dragged my mother out of the house and then into the backyard. And then he beat her to death in a very violent manner. And she went on to say that I, as a young lad, had followed them outside and I had witnessed that event, okay? And then my father noticed that I'd seen what happened and he dragged me back inside the log cabin and he told me that it was my fault and that I must never speak of this incident and it was me to blame for his actions. And she added that the trauma of that incident led to my becoming mute for 10 years from believing it was my fault and fearing my father's temper. And by this time, the lady was visibly quite distressed, of what she'd seen. And she asked me if I had any recollection of that memory in any way. And I said, no, not at all. So I said to her, okay, assuming that did happen, what might I do about it now in this lifetime to release any trauma caused in that previous lifetime? And she said to me, our traumas get stuck in our bodies and in our energy fields and the interdimensional energy fields between different dimensions. And she said, this trauma needs to be released. So I said to her, how might I do that? And she replied, what you need to do is to imagine yourself as that child witnessing that event. And she said to me, stay out of any judgment because you were just a child and you don't understand anything. She said, what I'd like you to do is to mourn the loss of your mother, to forgive your father as you may not be aware of the circumstances from his side of the story. And then she said to imagine sending love, care and support to that child. Tell him it wasn't his fault and that he's a good child, yeah, and that he'd done nothing wrong and that he was worthy of love. And she said, tell him it's safe now. Tell him it's appropriate now to let all that pain out. Tell him that you are a man now. You can look after yourself now so that he can let his guard down. So a few hours later, I laid on my bed, and though I had no memory or recollection of that event, I tried to imagine it as best I could. Initially, nothing happened, but after about 20 minutes of meditating on this story and trying to sort of imagine on my mind screen what it might have felt like to experience that trauma, and I was telling that child that he was beautiful and that he'd done nothing wrong. And on my mind screen, I found myself as a tiny entity inside this vast red cave, which symbolically felt to me like I was inside a giant womb. And then slowly this feeling of dread and distress started to come towards me like a dark rolling cloud within this cave and within this womb. And then in this meditation, one part of me was thinking, cool, let's get this trauma out of me. And another part of me was thinking, I don't know if I want to go here, okay? However, these days, my personal mantra is always walk towards the fear. So I sagged my body, I surrendered to what was, and I allowed that emotion to well up within me. And I began to sob and I began to cry. And this release went on and on and on and on for about 20 minutes, okay? And I just had to keep surrendering to those emotions as they kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And each time they subsided and fell back, I brought my focus back onto the emotions and I tried to help them rise back up again. And emotion after emotion after emotion kept flooding up, and I just kept letting them happen and letting them flow out of me. I didn't resist them. And then finally, after about 30 minutes, it just stopped. And in that moment, I was different. I instantly felt about 20% happier within myself, much lighter, much less dense. And that feeling has stayed with me. Now, apart from Jen, I didn't tell anybody else what had happened. And when I met with the lady on the second day, she just looked at me and she smiled. And she said, "You released it. Well done. I bet that feels better." And it did. And she went on to give me another trauma from a different life that was even more horrific. But that's a story for another video. To this day, I don't know if what she said was true or not. But the point is, I don't need to know, because with that trauma that I didn't even know I had released, I felt brilliant. And just perhaps that experience might explain why, though I had a wonderful father in this lifetime, I always found it hard to connect with him. And it was very difficult for me to talk about my emotions when I was a child. I mean, who knows? I don't know. Just as interestingly, when Jen sat with this lady, she said to Jen, "Why are you here?" And Jen said, "I don't know." And she replied, "I do. You're an artist and I need an illustration for my next book. That's why you're here." And there and then she commissioned Jen to produce a painting without even looking at any of her previous artwork. Just maybe nature or the universe has plans for us and is always nudging us towards what it knows is good for us. And this is why I try to say yes to every opportunity that comes my way. So this is what I mean by trying new things and accepting that sometimes we might get powerful results from seemingly unconventional processes. Just take this course, for example. So many people have told me that it just inexplicably felt right for them, that my face just kept popping up on their screens, or that something nudged them towards me, though their logical intellect couldn't explain why. But it's my guess that many people have resistance to exploring intangible inner reality concepts like this because as children, we were taught to focus our attention only on the external reality that was provable with logic and with reason. Although two people standing in an art gallery looking at the same external objective art piece may have two differing internal subjective experiences. The truth is, it's that internal subjective experience that is the reality for each person. Though they can't be scientifically measured, they are both experientially true. I hope this is making sense. We just weren't taught to think like this when we were young. I think our outer realities of matter may operate in conventional Newtonian, linear physical manners, whereas our inner reality of sense and fear, pain, love, creativity, they seem to be more energy-based, more non-linear, non-Newtonian, which is no less real, yet does operate very differently. And it's my experience that when a person can pivot and view their predicament from this new perspective, this new mindset seems to facilitate the ability to separate the story from the trauma within that individual. And when the story crumbles, that stuck energy is often released. Okay then. So let's get talking back about anxiety by exploring a very overlooked anxiety phenomenon, which is the freeze aspect of the sympathetic fight, flight, and freeze bodily response, which I think affects probably about 15% of anxious people. In those moments, they're typically fast brains and their bodies seemingly go into a sort of slow motion, sort of tranced out freeze mode, where they sort of feel paralyzed within their body and their brain, yet their observer seems to be unaffected and remains the witness of what's happening in both the inner world and the outer situations. And in this sort of weird time standstills moment, which feels like about 10 seconds in the inner temporal time, but I think usually in external time is only a second or less, okay? The first person feels vulnerable. They assume that others can see what's happening to them, which mostly they can't, and they begin to start doubting their own capabilities. Even though instinctually they know that they're clever, intelligent, and capable, they sort of phase out, trance out to some other place, okay? And this feeling of being out of control and this dissociation, it tends to freak them out. So what happens is they try to avoid situations that trigger this detachment, like social events, dating, public speaking, or whatever their unique trigger may be. So what's going on? Well, it's my guess that this response happens to people who have been subjected to an above average trauma, be that from sexual, physical, psychological, or rejection abuse, or from witnessing or being violently attacked, from receiving traumatic wounds, or being in very scary incidents, or in painful accidents. And I think this response is on the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, end of the spectrum scale. Wars, fights, rape, attacks, car crashes, fires, bullying, parental deaths, parental bullying, okay, robberies, muggings, murders, and horrific things like this. Terrible events where biologically and psychologically speaking, it made sense for the brain to dissociate from that fear, yeah? And what was happening in that moment, or to push those memories back to the furthest parts of the brain to almost forget that they happened. And then to set up an instant brain alarm, whereby if any situation similar to that initial event begins to unfold, the body would instantly jump to this perceived danger and try to move to the safety of this detached or frozen state. Of course, that alarm is regulated by the amygdala, as we've discussed many times, and they tend to work by pattern matching back to that first event, be that by a certain smell, a type of person, a type of place, a specific sound, or a person kicking off a certain behavior that links back to that first pattern. Also, for some people, I think it's important to acknowledge that their trauma may have happened as a baby, like in birth traumas, abuse, rejection, separation anxiety, animal attacks, watching scary movies, or parental altercations. And in these instances, of course, they would have no way of consciously remembering or interpreting those events. However, the energy of that trauma was still stored within their body, along with a trained tendency for hypervigilance. And I talk about an example of that from my own experience at the end of video 46. So if you are experiencing these freeze or these trance out moments, here are some suggestions for you to try. Firstly, if you can identify the trauma which seemingly may have started this off, then you may try a meditation much like the one I just described about that child who watched his mother being attacked, with the view not to blame, understand, or to analyze, but to allow any emotions to come to the surface and be cried, shaken, acted, or shouted out. Then the next time you revisit that meditation, change the ending of the story to have more closure, even if it's not the truth of what happened. Because what we're looking to do is to release the muscle memory fear from the body that was trapped in the body at that moment. Let me try and give you some examples. If you were bullied and you couldn't run away as you were trapped, you might imagine yourself running away and really feeling that motion in your legs, or even jumping up and running out of the room. Perhaps imagine yourself fighting back and physically punching the air or punching a cushion around you. If in your trauma you couldn't speak up, then you might imagine yourself saying what you'd wish to have said, even shouting it out as part of shifting this blockage. If you were abused, you might imagine telling that person what you wish them to know, and to tell them that you will no longer be a victim of that past event, that you will rise above it, you will become stronger from it, and see yourself confidently walking away from them as that child, or that young woman, or that young man. Of course, those traumas were terrible. But remember, in our new inner reality, we can make our experiences far better than they may have been in our external reality. Remember, our brains and our bodies are trickable. One woman told me about a sexual abuse experience when she was young, and that she had courageously decided to change her inner story to be that the man couldn't help himself because she was so attractive. Yeah. And she actually felt pity for him and his inability to control his animal emotions, and for having to live with the knowledge of his transgression. Now, perhaps that particular act of self-love may be too large or too big a step for some. But remember, this is not about good or bad, right or wrong. It's not about fairness or any other judgment. It's about changing our subjective inner experience of life to be more pleasant. Now, one inner reality concept that helped me enormously to let go and accept my past and all the world's corruption and lies is the Eastern concept of reincarnation and karma, where they say there is a cause and effect process by which good actions breed more good actions and bad actions bring about more harmful ones back to you. Now, once again, though I can't prove this is true, but I love the concept that through an individual's actions or inactions, they are self-accountable and experientially will pay for their harmful actions or receive good ones in this or in their next incarnation here in Earth School. And I like this concept because for me, it removes the notion that there is a vengeful God judging me. No, in my world, I am responsible for myself. However, I will benefit from my good actions. So this means to me that even if a person seemingly was not reported, they were not caught, or they were not legally punished for their bad actions. Ultimately, no miscarriage of justice is possible because the universe doesn't let anybody get away with anything in the long run. And this story works well in my own inner reality. When bad things happen to me, if I get sick, if I hurt myself, if I lose something or somebody, I sit with the pain of that loss. I let the emotions move through me. I try to stay out of my brain's stories. And I imagine that this event is my karmic payback. I'm paying back some karma from some previous indiscretion in this life or previous ones. And with that karmic offset, it allows me to raise my level of conscious awareness. Perhaps we get abused in this lifetime as we were the abusers in the last life. And I think when seen from this new perspective, it may have been in our karmic favor to have received that abuse or those unfavorable actions, as it rebalanced our scales. And all we need to do is to drop our negative stories about it. Now, of course, I can't prove if this is true. But if I were nature, if I were God, I wouldn't want to judge people. I'd make it so they get back what they give out. Things would be self-regulating until that person could discover that being kind and loving is so much more rewarding. And this is why, for me, forgiveness is so powerful. We don't forgive people for what they did. We forgive them so we don't need to keep running stories in our heads and reliving those old painful traumas time and time again. Hope this is making sense. Another action that you can take if you feel a freeze moment coming on, or if you're trying to break out of one, I think it's very powerful to fake a yawn with a big stretch that crosses your arms over your head, a bit like this. So you just... Okay. Mammals only seem to yawn when it's safe to sleep. So if there were wolves outside scratching at your door, you wouldn't be yawning, you'd be in a high state of alert. So by yawning, we are tricking the body by implying that it's safe out there. Plus the deep breath resets the parasympathetic nervous system, as we've seen many times, and crossing your hands over your head engages both hemispheres of the brain, which causes a reset. Much like the juggling interrupt that I taught you in the last video. Play around with it. It's really, really interesting. Okay, let's get back to discussing releasing trapped trauma or stuck energies, and bring some more concepts onto the table. Now, the first one I would like to introduce you to, if you don't know already, is something called EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. Put simply, if you watch a person as they talk, their eyes will move around. They'll look up to one corner, down to another, depending on whether they're remembering something, trying to recall how they feel about something, or accessing some sort of memory to recall what somebody might have said or what somebody might have done. And it seems that where their eyes move to is part of a brain link to access creativity, imagination, or old memories. Therefore, if you can find a skilled EMDR practitioner, they will take you through a process of moving your eyes around, which seems to disrupt or break a well-worn neural association between an eye position and a traumatic memory. And when those links break, what happens is those memories become less sticky, and often stuck emotions are discharged. So, although it sounds a bit different, EMDR with a very good practitioner, I think, is certainly worth trying, and I've personally had good results with it when it's been done to me. Now, because this video is a weird one, and an honest one, I would like to share with you one of the biggest struggles that I've had from everything that I've learned in the last 20 years. And it's around the topic of kinesiology, or as it's more commonly known, muscle testing, whereby a question is asked and the body is tested to see how it responds to that information by remaining strong or becoming weak momentarily. The implication is that our body senses what is good for it and it makes it go strong, and it can sense what is bad for it, which makes it go temporarily weak. Thus, this method can be used as a sort of yes-no test technique to see what is life affirming for us or what is life limiting for us. If we link it back to the Hawkins map of consciousness, what is above 200 and makes us go strong, and what is below 200 and makes us go weak. Now, initially, I thought that was a bit silly. But if you can factor in esoteric and Eastern philosophies that talk about something called the Akashic records, whereby every person's actions, words and thoughts leave an accessible record in a non-physical etheric realm, then this begins to make a little more sense. If you believe in a God, and you believe in a God that's judging you, then surely there must be a record of all the things you did, stored somewhere, whether that's in God or whether that's in the Akashic records. Now, many years ago, I struggled with concepts like this. However, after experiencing incredible downloads of knowledge myself and spending time with people with extraordinary gifts, I am now more than convinced. Also, if karma is real, there would need to be a record of all actions in all lifetimes to ensure its honest self-regulation. So to me, as weird as it is, it does make sense. So, do we human beings have an automatic and innate connection to nature, which informs us of what may harm us and what will enhance us outside of our primary five senses and our thinking, logical brain? Surely nature would have a mechanism whereby all its creatures could be aware of and able to sense what is safe and sense what is dangerous, especially the ones with tiny brains and no language capabilities, because how else could they survive? Why is it a dog sees something, sniffs it and doesn't eat it, sees something else, sniffs it and eats it? There's a yes-no thing going on with the energy of the universe. Now, any of you who've started to read the Dr. David Hawkins books that I've pointed you into in other videos, you'll be familiar with kinesiology. And all I can say is, as wacky as it seems, and as much as I cannot explain it, it works for me. It is very nuanced, and you need to experiment with it. But if kept simple, it's an incredible tool that you can use in two main ways. Firstly, to check what is good for you, over and above what your brain might be telling you. Because as we know, the brain is very often wrong or influenced by other cultural influences, or trying to please others, or guiding you to what might be best for somebody else rather than what's best for you in any moment. So it would be very good to actually test what is good for me rather than what is good for what's the story in my brain. I hope that makes sense. For example, I will often hold in mind a potential new client and ask my body, will it be in my best interest to work with them? And if my body goes strong, I may take them on as a client. But if my body goes weak, okay, I try not to take them on as a client. I don't need to know why. And it doesn't mean I can't help them. It just means that overall, it won't necessarily be in my best interest, therefore a misuse of my precious energy. And also, by referring to Hawkins' map of consciousness, you can see the types of mindsets that are high energy, that keep you strong, and the ones which are low energy, that deplete you biologically. Now, the second way that we can use is to get feedback from the non-verbal parts of your unconscious brain and your body. So you can ask your body if it's holding a trauma and from which time of your life it was installed. Now, there are many ways to do muscle testing, but for me, the simplest way is to play around with kinesiology via something called the stand-in sway test. What you do is you stand up and you relax your body and you close your eyes, and then you just ask a question that will elicit a yes or a not yes answer. So for example, I might say here, is my name John? And the body just gently moves forward. The move is unconscious. I don't consciously move it. Is my name John? It just moves forward by itself. It takes a bit of getting used to. If you say, is my name Fred? Nothing happens, okay? So you play around with this ability to ask yourself questions and get unconscious answers. But what you can do then is you can expand questions to say, am I holding a trauma in my body? Now, mine says no. But if it said yes, it would just move forward a tiny bit like this, okay? And what we then might say, okay, there's a trauma held in my body. Did that trauma occur before the age of 10? And if it's a move forward, it's a yes. And if there's nothing, there's a no. If no, you might say, well, did that trauma happen before I was 20? And it might move forward, or it might say no. So what you can do is you can slowly, yes, no, move down to an age of where that occurred, okay? As you move down to these ages, what you find is you can then hone in. So let's say it was 7 years old. Was that trauma at 7? Yes, okay. So then you can say, did that happen when I was at home? Yes or no. Did it happen when I was at school? Yes or no. Did it happen when I was playing? Yes or no. Okay. And what you can do is just very slowly, gently get down to an event, and very often in that moment something will come to your unconscious. Oh God, yeah, that's when I was at school and I cut my head, or that's when I was embarrassed. It's just an interesting way of asking your unconscious what's going on. It's my experience that if you track it down to ages, there is probably about an 18-month window of accuracy that we can get to. Okay? But you can also say, was the trauma from my birth process? Was the trauma, did it happen to me while I was growing in my mother's stomach because my mother had a trauma? And I personally am not interested in digging around to find out what was going on. What I'm interested in is saying, is there a blockage, okay, and how we can release it. So once you've got some feedback that there is a blockage, you have a number of options available to you. And I suggest that you try them all to see what happens. Firstly, we have that meditation that I suggested earlier, where we imagine what might have happened and we sit with that pain to try to let the emotion arise. Secondly, we can go back to the tapping from video 8. Even though that terrible thing happened when I was 7, I love and respect myself. And I ask my body to safely release these emotions as I'm an adult now, and I can handle these things. Handle these things, da 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 da. Deep breath, you know the process, okay? You go round, and you go round. It's very powerful. Thirdly, there's a book by Dr. Bradley Nelson called The Emotion Code, where he takes you through a simple process that helps you to identify not only when the trauma was introduced, but also where it's being stored in the body and what other aspects of your life that it's affecting. And then he guides you through to release that trauma through the use of magnets. Now, personally, I found this process, though strange, to be very, very effective. Plus, it can be done remotely to you by an emotion code practitioner if you don't have the time to learn how to do all these things. Okay, it really, really is worth exploring, especially even online, because all energy is connected. Distance is not important when you're doing release stuff. But finally, the most powerful, automatic and natural way to release trauma that I have ever found was through the use of ayahuasca. Now, I discussed that in detail back in video 46. My visit in the Amazon rainforest to take that plant medicine, Ayahuasca, which is a natural psychedelic made from plants. I won't go into too many details here, except to say it was one of the most life-changing experiences. And also, it's a natural process ranging back for thousands and thousands of years. It's nature's free and original psychopharmacology, okay? And under the influence of this medicine, hidden memories from my childhood were retrieved, and the associated trauma from them was immediately and automatically purged from my body. One particular purging event went on for about an hour, and I felt like I might die from all the energy escaping from my body through vomiting and shaking and shouting and screaming. However, once it was over, I felt totally different. And the depression that I'd had been fighting all my life was simply gone. That energy form had been ejected out of me. Now, that was 9 years ago, and I'm still wholly depression free. And though I can't prove this, my personal experiences have led me to believe that various forms of energy, such as trapped trauma, stuck energy, or interdimensional entities, which we may call demons or the jinn, may feed off our low energy fears and our negative victim stories. And it's my guess these energetic entities, which I simply and non-judgmentally label as riders, because they parasitically feed from our energy and they cause much of our problems with addictions, procrastination, and other self-sabotaging behaviors, so that they can feed off of the anxiety and the fear and the worry that they themselves are causing by influencing our thoughts and our actions. And I would recommend an ayahuasca ceremony run with doctors, psychologists, and native shamans if you're going to go down this path. And it can be a very, very powerful experience. And my last comment on this is that many people say to me, oh, John, I could never take drugs. Whilst at the same time, they're on antidepressants and beta blockers. These riders, they seem to be able to cleverly distort the story you tell yourself to stop you taking actions that might result in their demise. I hope this is making sense. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, I'm just saying this is what seems to happen. Now, another process that really impressed me is the use of the anesthetic ketamine to treat depression and anxiety. And more clinics are opening up that are licensed to offer this form of therapy or treatment. I don't know why it works, although I do have some non-scientific guesses based on my experience and from my knowledge from talking to many of these licensed clinicians about how they use it. Metaphorically speaking, I think that there are 4 main ways to comprehend what might happen. Once again, these are not very scientific, but what if science can't or isn't able to measure these things? So firstly, as an anesthetic, ketamine not only numbs your body and your 5 senses, but it also numbs and turns down your overactive, logical, and overthinking prefrontal cortex. And with this analytical aspect of your brain sort of out of the way, things can be seen differently, and memories or new understandings can be released from the unconscious mind. Secondly, most people with anxiety have very controlling natures, and they hate the feeling of being out of control of their thoughts or their feelings or their actions. And what I've been trying to tell you since video 3 is actually there's very little you can control out there. Therefore, by being courageous enough to try this out is a huge step forward in them learning how to let go of the story that they are actually in control of anything. It's a very powerful process. Thirdly, with the body and the thinking mind mildly anesthetized, you finally get to experience what it feels like to be the non-verbal observer, or what we might call your formless energetic soul, the rider of your horse. Because seemingly you can't anesthetize your soul because it's made of energy and not matter. However, if the body, like when you have an operation, if the body has complete deep anesthetic, like prior to an operation, I believe the soul can't handle that low frequency. It's just too dense. So it has to jump to another higher frequency dimension until the body is brought back up again to a higher frequency and it can come back in again. And it's my guess that this is why so many reports of out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences occur during intense trauma or whilst having operations when the body is completely anesthetized. It's just my theory. Once again, I don't think we should fear these events. I think quite the opposite. I take a lot of comfort from my out-of-body experiences, from my astral planing. My body is here, but my soul is doing whatever out in the great universe, okay? And I enjoy having times with my soul, and I enjoy having times with my body. We are in two planes. Can you see how these concepts may be hard for our logical, science-based left brain to initially believe, though they begin to make a little more sense if we look at everything from this new energetic lens. And finally, it's my experience that whilst under the influence of the ketamine infusion, if the individual does breath work to increase their energy field and thus their frequency, okay, that they're vibrating at, sometimes these energetic riders or trapped traumas, they can be released because they can't handle these high frequencies. They feed off of the low frequencies. So they are forced to move through your body and out of your body via your breath or through your lymphatic or sinus systems or directly through your body. Once again, though this may feel scary initially, it soon just becomes a process that you can relax into and just accept. You let it happen to you rather than you forcing it. You raise your frequency, they can't handle it, it comes out. And remember, I'm not advising you to do these things, and I'm not offering you any medical advice. I'm just talking about my experiences and the metaphors I use in my head to make my subjective inner reality as pleasant as possible, regardless of what's happening in my external objective reality, which mostly I can't control, nor actually these days I wish to. Gosh, a lot of things. Another concept I struggled to accept until I experienced it, until I actually experienced it in action, was the concept of chakras, wheels of energy within my auric field that allow the flow of energy from the universe into me through my meridians and my acupuncture systems. It's said these wheels seemingly get blocked and stop spinning as they become clogged up with stuck energy, trauma, and with these riders, thus leaving us tired and low frequency because we can't pull the energy in from the universe. And what changed for me was, in the ketamine infusion state, where my 5 primary senses were to some degree numbed by the anesthetic, I could actually feel other energetic senses, and I could actually feel some of these wheels spinning. Okay? And very often, as a rider was ejected, it would come out. I would feel the spin increase, and I could sense the frequency of my body rise as energy was pulled into me from the air around me, or perhaps even from another dimension. Once again, who knows? I don't need to know, but I do know that it made me feel much better. And not just a little bit, much better. And this experience led me to become more interested in what the chakras are and what they do. However, as I said at the beginning of this video, I don't want to teach these things, but I'm interested in using them on myself. So if this interests you, I think the most common sense explanation of this inexplicable subject was from the author Caroline Myss in her book Energy Anatomy. And I think when you're ready, I think it's certainly worth exploring. Another concept that I struggled to accept it initially, but I now have no doubts about, though I still can't prove, is the concept of energy attractor fields, or as they used to be called in the past, egregores. And it refers to non-physical thought forms, or the energy caused by the collective thoughts of a distinct group of people. And this concept allows my brain to accept concept like Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness, where he says that each person, by their current energetic density and frequency, is energized to and governed by an attractor field that controls how that person thinks, behaves, and experiences life. And I think that's why anxious people think and behave in similar ways, as do prideful people or depressed people. But also why hopeful and loving people, they act in similar ways too. They are unknowingly be influenced by the universal energetic attractor field of that level outside of their conscious awareness. It's like a person thinks they have free will, but it's only as accessible as that particular energy field would allow them to have free will within. And I think this also explains why the same animals in different countries all act in the same ways. It's almost as if they're all connected to a global energy attractor field template for that species. And it might explain why schools of fish move as one, as do a murmur of birds. Therefore, if a person would desire to upgrade to a higher level of consciousness, it wouldn't be about them trying to understand their current plight. It would be about them releasing trapped energy and riders, and then thinking and acting to suit the next level of consciousness above their current level, as I talked about in video 37. And then the universe can see that you can handle more, and because it can see you handle more, it will move you up to the next level, where instantly you can access more energy from the field, and your quantum brain receives new ways of higher thinking in line with that new level of consciousness. Now, I'm not nutty, right? I know this sounds mad, but I have experientially found this to be true. And all I'm saying to you is, here's my story. Go and find out what you need to find out to move yourself on, but try everything, right? But remember, your riders will be trying to sabotage you every step of the way to try and stop their own demise. Can you see how this new perspective may become very, very empowering? And once you can think in these more energetic manners, you access the opportunity to not be caught up in them. We've seen these energy forms, these egregores in action in the last few years, where energy fields sweep around the world, like Black Lives Matters, Me Too, woke perspectives, the pandemic, vaccinations, because it takes a lot of courage to not be swept up by one of these attractor fields. It takes a lot of courage to stand your ground and do what you intuitively feel is best for you, even if it goes against everybody else who's caught up in that invisible energy field. I hope this is making sense. And I'd like to finish with another perspective. It's my experience from working with so many people that often, as people overcome their anxiety and they sort their lives out, rather than feeling wonderful, they just kind of feel numb and alone. Now, I went through this phase maybe 15 years ago. I didn't feel bad, but neither did I feel fantastic. I sort of just felt neutral. And because I've been spending so much time studying and trying everything, I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed in myself, and I just thought, well, I've done all this work, and is this what it feels like? And I was also very frustrated that although I was exploring a more spiritual life, I wasn't having at that time any spiritual experiences that would prove to me that all this effort was actually worth it. I wanted to believe in an intelligent universe, but it was clear that I was a seeker rather than a true believer. And then back in 2011, I went on a week-long meditation retreat in America. And after a few days, I woke up one morning feeling absolutely amazing. I was completely blissed out. I felt just incredible. And my brain was totally silent. Not a thought, nothing in there, okay? And though my brain was completely silent, I had a non-verbal knowing and an awareness of everything around me, okay? All problems in my life were just accepted, and everything and everybody were just perfect, just the way they were, and I didn't need anything from anybody. It was an incredible experience. And as I met up with the others for breakfast, I couldn't eat because I was just completely overcome with love for everybody around that table. Okay, I couldn't even speak. As each time I tried to speak, I just became emotionally overwhelmed with joy and happiness. And that blissful state lasted for about 6 hours, where I just sat on a sofa looking out to sea, and I was just totally incapacitated. And to this day, it was one of the most beautiful yet inexplicable experiences of my life. And as that experience began to back off and my old self sort of came back online, I sat with one of my friends and she said, "It's amazing, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes, what is it?" And she said, "It's the universe temporarily connecting you with a higher attractive field. It's a glimpse of what's possible to show you that all the effort is worth it. It's a peek at what's in store for you." And she said, "It seems that just when you want to give up, nature seems to step in to remind you why it's worth all the effort." And since then, and when I stopped being a searcher and started becoming a believer, I've now had so many of these incredible experiences. And as the great teachers say, these higher fields of energy are always there in the background. You just need to let go of all of your worry and drama and trapped traumas. Or to put it differently, raise your frequency to access them. They say behind the clouds, the sun is always shining. So my final point is, retreats and group therapy scenarios made a big difference to my emotional health, to my emotional well-being, and to my social inclusion. And I certainly would advise people to check them out. I hope you can see now why I'm always saying you can't overcome anxiety and remain the same person. It's by becoming a new person with which anxiety would struggle to reside. And to me, that's the common sense approach. My journey was unique, and I'm sure yours will be too. There's no right and there's no wrong way to proceed. You just need to discover what's right for you by trying everything rather than listening to the old stories in your head that will try and pull you back. So, thank you, and good luck exploring life through this alternative lens of energy. See you later.